Good afternoon. It is May 30th, and the dump load controller is kicking on and off all day. Got good power coming in from solar. It's actually floated itself down. We were making 1300 watts earlier. It floated itself down to just over or just under 400. Turbines are just barely spinning. It's in and out from 0 to 50 watts. But anyhow, these guys are fully rehabbed and recharged. See the dump kicked off, and they're sitting here floating down, but they settle at about 25.7 to 25.9, which is a very charged battery. Individually, they would all test at probably 12.7 to 12.8 disconnected. So they're not really pulling much anymore from the primary bank as a dump load. So as this guy kicks on and off, there's almost nothing going through. And because it's summertime, I don't want to be burning to keep my water warm. I don't know if you saw that video a while back, but I've got a copper coil going through my wood furnace stovepipe, and that's what heats up the water. There's a circulation pump that pump is right down there, and that pulls it into the bottom of the tank. Hot water, the heat obviously rises and heats from the bottom up. So it pulls from the top, goes down through the stovepipe and returns. I'm going to disconnect both of these lines and run them to this little guy. There's a 6-gallon electric water heater. This is for point of use heating under a sink cabinet or something like that. But real simple. In and out. This is the in, this is the out, and I put the right fittings on here. I'm going to thread seal everything so I don't have any leaks. So this one will come out of this tank and go to the bottom line on the big tank, and the top will come back down to here. And instead of the factory electronics in here, I'm going to basically disable all of this, pull the factory element out. It's a 120 volt element. I'm not going to hook this up to 120 volt, because then I would have to have another inverter just to run this thing, and it's a dump load. So I got a 24 volt 600 watt hot water element from Thermodyne. That's at hydrogenappliances.com, and this guy is going to go in there. And I got 50 feet of 10 gauge that's going to come from my auxiliary bank and go to the water heater. I'll disable all this, and I'm going to put a thermo relay or a snap disc. I'm going to hook it up direct first, see how well that works, and see what temperatures I get to and how fast. With just the 600 watt element, these normally have a pair of, I believe this is 2000 watt element, so that'll heat a heck of a lot faster than that will. So I'm gonna see what I actually get out of it, and then for protection I'm going to put a thermal relay for a disconnect to prevent overheating and overpressurizing the tank, because these tanks can turn into missiles if they overheat. It blows the bottom out and they go up and take everything with it. It's actually amazing if you've ever seen it happen. Mythbusters did an episode on it. Check it out. Pretty amazing. So anyways, I'm going to get these thread sealed, crank back on there tight, run my wire, get the new element in there, disable the factory electronics, get it in place, hooked up, and hopefully I keep on getting enough power feeding in to keep the dump load going. It's still going. I imagine when I actually hook this up to a 600 watt load, it's going to pull my voltage down a lot faster, and then the solar controller is going to let more power come through, because I'm capable of 1400 watts. So if it's floating at full batteries using only 400 watts, I can definitely run my 600 watt element and still keep the batteries full. So we'll see. Try and get her thrown together as fast as possible, and be right back. Alright, so it's all hooked up. I don't know how you're gonna be able to see. Oh yeah, I guess the new element is in. It's the 24 volt 600 watt element, 10 gauge solid copper run to it. At 600 watts, 24 volts, that is about 25 amps. So it's a very good dump load, very effective dump load, and it's pretty much kind of pushing the limit of what I'm carrying for current on this 10 gauge wire. But how I hook this up, I've got my circulation pump on the top side, which this is starting to warm up. I've had it connected for about 25 minutes now, and I can actually feel it warming up, so that's a good thing. It's working. So it's pulling water from the top of the little tank, and this is where it's all warming up. That's a natural gas tank, so there's no place to install an element. That's why I had to use the 2-tank system. And then that pushes that down to the bottom side of the big tank, and overflow comes back into the bottom. That draws this, so it's circulating all the way, crisscrossing through the 2 tanks. And yeah, I can, feel these lines warming up. This one's warmer than this one. It's going to take a while to warm up all this. This is 40 gallon and a 6 gallon, so it's almost 50 gallons of water warming up on a 600 watt element. So it'll probably take some time. Once it gets over a certain threshold, I think it'll warm up a lot faster. It's still getting the chill out. I had to completely drain both of these. Excuse me. I had to completely drain both of these to get the lines hooked up and sealed, all the fittings on. So it's all fresh groundwater that was in here, and that was about 52 degrees when I pumped it in, and we are getting somewhere. So we're up 10 degrees in about 25, maybe 30 minutes. And that's awesome. And because this is a natural gas tank, they have obviously a chimney that run all the way through them. As this warms up, this will draw air out. It'll act as a chimney. So I'm just going to cap that with some insulation, and it'll keep it from cooling itself down. I'll eventually insulate all these lines after I get to temp, make sure everything is maintaining pressure. I don't no drips, anything. I made quite a mess getting it all hooked up. There's a bit to mop up, but yeah, I had to move the drum rug because that got soaked. But it got a little late in the evening, and the sun, I'm not getting much from solar anymore. The sun's at the horizon, so there's only 50 watts coming in from solar, almost nothing coming in from wind. So I fired up the generator just because I want to see this thing work. So that raised battery voltage back up and engaged the dump load, and the water heater line, this is the one that's going to the water heater, is connected on the auxiliary bank. After this test run, I am going to repurpose this 30 amp charge controller and just use the load portion of it. I'll hook the battery up right there and then hook the water heater line out to that, and that will prevent my auxiliary bank from over discharging. When the dump load engages, it'll charge this bank up, and when it gets to safe voltage, the controller will engage the water heater and then it'll run that until the sun goes down or the wind slows down, and it'll basically just continuously run the hot water element until this battery voltage gets down to I want to say 22 volts is the disconnect, maybe 23. I can change the parameters, but I'll set it for probably 23.5 or so it doesn't damage them. They are already junk batteries that I've rehabbed just using as a dump load, but then when that disconnects, these will still continue to push power to the element for some time until they discharge, and then the controller will disconnect, so they're not completely toast. And the next day when the sun comes up, it'll start all over again. So we'll check back in about an hour or so and see how much the water is warmed up. See how good this is gonna work. I'm excited. All right. Well, it is the next morning. I kind of futzed with this all night. I was just trying to get water hot so the wife and kids could clean up and stuff. After getting this hooked up the first time, I had to drain both of these tanks so I could get my fittings on secure, and that had to bring in ice cold groundwater to replace it. So both of the tanks got cooled down to about 52 degrees. So it was really a lot of work for just the 600 watt element to get that raised back up. It did, after about 3 hours, get the water back up to 80, but it was starting to get late, and I decided to tie back in the heater coil system in the chimney pipe, basically just for emergencies. You know, I got this hooked up late, so I didn't have really the power to be wasting on heating water. This is all designed to be hooked up on the dump load, which is clicking on and off and on and off right now, trying to equalize the secondary batteries. But anyhow, I'll be able to use this as a backup if we don't have a lot of energy available. In the meantime, you know, summertime, most days I have plenty of energy. I'm going to take off the top piece there, stuff some insulation in there so it's not just drafting, cooling that coil down and acting as a radiator, drawing the heat back away from the water. So the way this is all hooked up, I ran the pump straight into the top of the heating tank. This is the one with the element. So this is pulling from the top. It's pulling the hottest water out of this tank and pushing that down into the big tank and heating the big tank from the bottom up. That then comes out, goes through the coil, down into the chimney pipe, and back in to the bottom of this tank. So if I do need to start a fire, it'll also heat from this tank. It'll come in the bottom, heat this tank, come out the top, and so on. And these are great little pumps. I'll put a link in the description, but they're like 6 watts or something like that, and they circulate 2.1 gallons per minute. But we're holding a good temp. 104 degrees. We just ran the dishwasher. Yeah, 103. A little colder right there, but it's warming back up, so it's working good. And over here, I've got this all completed and hooked up correctly. So again, dump load, vents, power from the primary batteries into the secondary batteries, and it's got its own voltage gauge down here. There's just over 1,000 watts coming in. We're only using about 130, so it's clipping the dump controller up and down. I've got it set to engage at 29.2, disengage at 27.2. So that's venting down into here. Then right in the center of this bank, I've got wire coming up to, this is another solar charge controller. I'm not using it for solar panels. I'm using this as a protection on the secondary battery bank, and running the water heater off of the load output. This can handle a 30 amp load, and see right here, that's exactly what it's using. So oh, I just turned it off. There it goes, back on. Guess that's the load control. So yeah, the 600 watt element is actually pretty accurately rated. It's using steady 650 watts. It kind of fluctuates up and down because of voltage, but that's pretty accurately rated. So that heating element was from Thermodyne, and I'm very happy with it so far. It's working. As these soak up enough power to stay above 27.2, that'll stop clicking. It'll just keep feeding power in continuously. These two will kind of equalize as long as the solar keeps on pushing enough in. But yeah, pretty cool. Heat and water for free. That's pretty swell. And the system just keeps growing. But it all serves a vital role. Thanks for watching. Take care.